This episode is brought to you by HelloSign, a Dropbox company. Sign documents 80% faster with HelloSign, the quickest way to get e-signatures for every type of document, so you can celebrate all those successful moments sooner. If you hate waiting for signatures, HelloSign is music to your ears. Try it for free today at HelloSign.com.
Empire.
Hello and welcome to my podcast. Another Sunday, another loss. The voice of the Washington football team, Bram Weinstein, and I will discuss all that happened. There were reasons for some optimism in the first half, especially with the defense, and reality crashed down hard in the second, especially with that offense. Before I get going, I do want to kind of touch one more time on the Sean Taylor stuff really quick. Now, Bram and I are going to discuss this later, but we're going to talk about him, the player, and what this day meant for family and for us who were there covering him at the time he was here. For starters, it was a nice day for his family, so that's number one, and that's the most important thing. Whatever the fans are saying, we know the importance for you, but for them, this is what mattered too. I know some people get upset unless you bash the organization for everything and kind of view everything in nefarious terms. My job is to report what I know, and then you can decide. What I know is that multiple players were aware of a ceremony involving Taylor, as was his family. Now, he'd already been honored in the Ring of Honor. The only ceremony that was really left was something like this, but they didn't spell it out. So now that leaves it up for conjecture. That's what I know. I've heard from multiple people in the organization about how they know they screwed up. Trust me, they really know how much they screwed up. It wasn't just something they're saying publicly. Behind the scenes, they absolutely 1,000% know. And I think they underestimated what Taylor's value or what Taylor meant to the fans and still means to you fans. I know what I was told about when they settled on this. It was around 2 months ago. That's when they settled on the ceremony. He said they wanted to keep it quiet until this week, so that's what they're saying. You can believe whatever you want. My job is not to jump to conclusions and think the worst about every situation without evidence to support it. Now, we can make those jumps at sometimes. As a reporter, I can't just assume the worst. I have to go with what I know, not what I want to believe or what the narrative is. So that's what I do. That's what I did. It's my job as a professional to handle it that way. And then you guys can make up your own minds, and I'll just leave it there. Now, here's my conversation with the voice of the Washington football team, Bram Weinstein.
This episode is brought to you by Babbel. Thinking about learning a new language? Babbel, the #1 selling language learning app, is here to help. Whether you want to learn French for future travel plans or Spanish to land a new job, Babbel works because it's built around real life. It teaches you everyday, practical conversations that you'll actually use. Their quick, interactive lessons are built by real language experts and voiced by real native speakers, and they get you speaking about real-life topics right away. And because Babbel is available on the web and as an app, you can complete these lessons wherever you are, so you can learn at your own pace. All you need is 15 minutes a day, and you'll be on your way to confidently speaking a new language in just a few weeks. Now, for a limited time, Spotify listeners can get up to 65% off their subscription by visiting babbel.com/Spotify.
All right, Bram. So, some of this stuff's getting old, but I'm curious from your perspective at halftime. What were you thinking about how this game was going and what they were showing?
Well, not that I like to believe too much in the mystical, but considering the things that had happened, there was definitely this feeling of, is Sean Taylor here right now? Like, what's going on? Because that one interception that Mahomes threw where he was botched a snap, was getting sacked and just tossed it up in the air. Every other quarterback in the league would get benched for doing something like that. I was like, that was nuts. And then, then they had that crazy 19-yard punt. There were just things happening that were really going in Washington's favor. And you look up at the scoreboard and it's 13-10.
Right.
And, I knew I think everybody probably knew they'd be in trouble because, how long is this going to last? 13 is not going to cut it. And they had their chances and they didn't take advantage of them. And those guys are like a slot machine. Eventually they're going to hit a jackpot on you. And they did. It's crazy to say this because the yardage total was very high, but I actually think that was one of their better defensive performances of the year, in that there were not the same collective major gaffes that occurred over and over And that's what I was really concerned about coming in, that like they're just going to lose Hill or Kelsey somewhere along the way, or one of those other receivers. There's these bombs, and then all of a sudden it gets out of hand, which it never did. So, to their credit, they hung in there with, in my opinion, the best quarterback in the league.
And, it's funny because like Mahomes threw for 390 yards, I think it was, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
They had almost 500 yards of offense. But in that second half, while there were issues, the corners needed to tackle better. Jackson had a big whiff on one time on Tyreek Hill. Kendall Fuller missed a couple tackles. You have Montez Sweat with a bad, offsides penalty. We just lined up offsides on a 3rd and 10 that was incomplete. Those you cannot have. But then there are other times where Mahomes just like, I don't know another quarterback who can make that play, maybe other than the guy they're facing next week and Aaron Rodgers. But even some of those, that pass that he had across the field to Tyreek Hill,
I know.
Who's going to throw that? The little flip to Travis Kelce. I mean, those are things that is something that he did. So I thought there were things that they could build on. I thought they played better. But, Bram, where I go back to is that the drive in the second half where they missed the field goal, that to me was pretty much the game. And I say that because, they needed to get a touchdown at some point on those. And, when Hopkins missed that, even if he makes it, I still think it's a bad – it's not the great drive because they needed to get a touchdown. And that's where I felt like that was, to me, was maybe their last chance to really to make some noise.
They blew the 3rd and 2. They just blew that. They blew the 3rd and 2, and then they missed field goal. And, this is what I was worried about today coming in. Like, if Kansas City scored on some deep pass early, I was very nervous that the bow would break early because Ron Rivera mentioned this, and I was concerned about this when you play a team like this, that I don't, are they a particularly confident team? And I don't know whether they are or they're not. And, the second that happened, the point you're referencing, that's when it was over. Right. And at that point, though, it was 17-13. Like, remember that.
Well, at that point, that missed field goal would have put them up 16-10. So, and the reason I say, because they needed to get a touchdown in that series. They needed a touchdown out of one of those.
I agree. And think about that for a moment. Like, that miss took the air out of the building, took the air out of them. Everything changed. And granted, I don't want to take anything away from the Chiefs. Like, there's a reason why that guy's the best young quarterback maybe ever.
He's fun to watch.
He's phenomenal. I mean, he's phenomenal, and that's the problem. In playing someone like that, this is the difference between their team and the Chiefs. Like, think about all the people that are missing or all the problems that they have. Like, their linebackers have been really bad this year. Their secondary has been really terrible this year. They made a change in positions there. They were missing people. They're missing their best pass rusher. They're missing their best running back. Like, they were missing a couple linemen. And they won going away despite turning it over 3 times, having a shanked punt, turning it 3 times in the red zone. And they won going away anyway, because that's what good teams do. And this team's just not there yet. They're not. They're far from that. They're not there. And confidence matters. Mahomes made some crazy decisions. And what is he doing in the second half? He looks like he's in complete literal control and can do literally anything he wants. And to one other point about the defense, I'm worried, the time of possession part's really frightening about what happened in the second half. They just completely controlled the game, from there. But to your point about Sweat and Young, one of the massive keys, Washington tried to do a similar thing that Buffalo did and others have done, which is basically, we're not going to bring a lot of people. We're going to play back. You're going to have to move methodically up the field on us. And in the first half, what they did do really well was they kept Mahomes in the pocket. And
really well.
He completes a bunch of passes. But at least they're going dink and dunk down the field. The clock is running. They're not a pinball machine. They're not, tilting a game. And in the second half, the edge control got out of control. They had a couple of bad offsides, but there were also rushes where we've seen a lot for this. Chase and Sweat, get outside and go upfield the second he's ducking under it. The second he's rolling out to the right, you are finished with him. You're finished. He's either running or he's throwing, and he can do things with his arm that I've never seen anyone else ever do. And once that stuff started happening and it just started kind of rolling downhill, they were done. So whatever discipline they had to keep him in the pocket in the first half, it disappeared in the second half. And then Mahomes became Mahomes, and you're finished. Well,
and you know what else also happens there too? Because this happened a couple of times where the edge guys, I can't remember if it was Chase or Montez, gets a little bit wide, And then Ioannidis rushes inside. He rushes in. So you basically had a guy getting wider, another guy going too far inside, and Mahomes slides out. It may have even been on the Tariq Hill one. I don't remember, but it was certainly led to a big play. And it was set up because of the rush discipline. And the converse side was Kansas City did a great job keeping Taylor Heineke in the pocket. And he's clearly not as dangerous as Mahomes is, but they made him made him beat him from the pocket. The other thing, because I did like I liked the defensive strategy because they played more cover 2 or 2 deep safeties than they have all year, probably combined in the first 4 games. And they had to, and they had Curl back there and they had Bobby McCain back there. But you need, like the corners, Jackson gives up a big play, although it was a perfect throw. The other problem, the one problem I had defensively, Kendall Fuller had the pick, but man, he dropped one in that first series. And you've got they had to take advantage of every gift. And that was the problem that I had at halftime is they didn't do that. And that's where you knew they were in trouble. But that's why I go back to that one drive. And so and that's what I was going to ask you, Bram, on that one drive before the Hopkins miss, I think it's like 4th and 6, not ideal, but knowing that the Chiefs offense is a ticking time bomb, knowing that they've already turned over a few times and, you're still up by 3, would you have gone for it in that situation?
We were talking about that. I think because it did have this feel of, let's just go for broke here. First of all, no one thinks you're going to win. Your record's 2-3. We know what the schedule is ahead of you. You know that if you think you're going to stifle them, you haven't watched football in the last 5 years. So we talked about it a little bit. And I don't know. I think, I do think hindsight is what it is. The missed field goal's bad. I mean, it really is. And, the other choices are the other choices. I know I'm not going to parse out whether, because I think it's too easy to go because what they did, the other way didn't work to their benefit, that it's easy to say you should have done it another way. So I don't I don't know. I think there's a case for it. So
at the time,
there's definitively a case for it. The whole, we're sitting up there too, going go for broke here. Just come on, eventually this guy is going to look like this guy. Go for broke on him and see if you can get the score where you need to get it to. And I'm with you actually. It's crazy to say it, but I actually think collectively this was one of their better defensive games of the year, even though the yards and time possession won't look that way. But think about the first half. They had the ball longer than the Chiefs did in the first half. They held them to 10 points in the first half. They caused turnovers in the first half. They kept them in the pocket.
They did what they wanted to. Yeah.
They got completely out of the discipline that they had there. And it was funny, when I watched Buffalo especially, and this is why they're a Super Bowl team. They were very disciplined the entire game with him, but 2, in the second half when Young and Sweat or whoever else the ends were getting upfield and he's just dipping through it. Buffalo never did that. They would basically create a pocket and the ends would stop and put their foot in the ground and basically stand there and say, you're not running out here, and throw it from the pocket. That's what you're going to do. And this team did not do that. Once Mahomes was on the move, it was over. And, the other side, it was well, you saw Buffalo do this. Well, you couldn't completely replicate it because we don't have Tremaine Edmonds on this team. And our secondary hasn't played like Buffalo's has. So the back 7 needed to hold up its end of the bargain. And I thought that they were, again, in the first half better. But this is the difference between the good teams, and the teams that are trying to become good. They could not hold on to this for 60 minutes. In the end, losing to the Chiefs, there's no shame in it. Everybody has.
Right.
Welcome to the last 6 years of the NFL with them. But the way they went down in the end, you'd think they were blown out, even though if you watched again for the second straight week, statistically, they were kind of hanging around with them in the same way that they were kind of statistically dominating the Saints the week before, but it's just not all collectively there yet. And that was the scariest part of the schedule. And the scariest part of this portion of the schedule was they're going to have to be collectively different than they've been up to this point to have a real shot to beat any of these other teams, because they don't have Aaron Rodgers or Pat Mahomes or Tom Brady as their quarterback. And that's why it's so daunting.
It is. And, the funny thing is you go back to the confidence thing. If you're the Chiefs defense, you have confidence no matter what's going on because you got Mahomes on the other side. And that gives them confidence, hey, just keep it in the game, just make a play somewhere because this guy's going to get us out of trouble. And this team doesn't have that. You can't rely on Taylor Heineke digging you out of trouble like that. And that's, that is, it's not on Heineke. He is what he is. But that's what this offense has. They can't dig out of trouble like that. And that's where Buffalo could too, because you got Josh Allen.
That's
and
right.
These guys don't have that. And there were big plays that Mahomes missed last week that he hit today. That deep one down the sidelines to was a Hardman against Jackson was a play that he was missing last week. And then you have the tight end making a nice catch over Landon Collins. And those plays weren't being made last week. The Tyreek Hill was, or the botched the pick that bounced off his hands was what was happening, but everything else was not going their way. So that was another thing. But offensively, where is this team at? And I know they're missing guys. And Curtis Samuel, that absence, I think, is adding up because they need that guy. And that situation is very, very frustrating for them. But where do you feel like this offense is at right now?
So I am, today was disappointing for them because of all the things you named about the Chiefs, I know everybody's been disappointed with the defense. I am too. Today is one of those days though, where I go, if you're going to get nitpicky about them against a group of players like Mahomes, Hill, and Kelsey, who are all going to be in the Hall of Fame, you need to recognize who they played today, right? Those guys are going to make plays. And if you're going to get upset that they gave up this or that, well, that's why those guys are who they are. That's why they're in the Super Bowl every year. There's a reason for that. Our offense, today 13 is unacceptable against that defense, especially with 3 turnovers. They have the worst scoring defense in the league. Their linebackers and secondary are really bad. They are missing their best pass rusher. They give up chunk yard after chunk yard after chunk yard. And I would just say this, I would describe it at this point as discombobulated would probably be the way I would put it. They have a lot of parts. I think we knew this kind of going in, that Scott Turner was given a lot of parts. It's his job now to figure out how to use them. And I don't know that there's been a semblance of them using them in a way that seems to have any kind of consistency attached to it.
They don't have an identity, Bram.
No, they don't have an identity. They don't. And I'm with you on Curtis Samuel, but it's not like Curtis Samuel was there and then he's gone. He hasn't been there from the get-go. So,
but he's the kind of guy they need. My point on him is more so they just need more talent out there. And De'Ami Brown has been, to me, disappointing.
He's from the get-go from the summer looked like a rookie to me. And in the situations where he gets in 50-50 positions, he has yet to come up with a play. And that separates NFL receivers from receivers who are just average. Correct. The separation for Terry McLaurin is, he's very fast, but he is hyper competitive and incredible typically in 50-50 situations. That's what makes a difference for him. Brown may become that. He's just not that yet, right? He's just not that yet. And so hopefully he will for them. But each opportunity he's had, and this started back in training camp, he looks like a rookie to me in those specific situations. It doesn't mean he can't get better at them. But they've given him opportunities and they haven't come around. I think some people get lost in the shuffle at times. Earlier in the season, it looked like McKissick got lost in the shuffle. And today, what I would say is, and this just seemed to be logically where everybody was coming in, Kansas City's defense is really bad. And they have Pat Mahomes. I don't know how you don't become a run-heavy offense today. I really don't understand
how you
don't.
My thing too, going in.
So I'm, and then,
that was
Gibson was going in and out with the shin injury, and maybe they felt like they couldn't, but they came out throwing, and it surprised me. I think it surprised everybody. Don't you want to play clock? Don't you want to shorten the game? Don't you think you can run on these guys? Because I would think you can run on these guys. And it felt unbalanced the other way. And so that's why I would describe it as kind of discombobulated. I'm not sure they know exactly what they're good at, or when they do come into a game, are they outthinking themselves a little bit when they come into them? Because 13 points against that team, to me, we could talk about the defense all we want. The second half was, disappointing in time of possession and a couple of the big plays that were given up. But really, I hang this one way more on the offense than I do on the defense. The fact that they were only up 13-10 at halftime after all those turnovers, playing the worst defense in the league. Yes, it's on the offense. They needed to execute better. They did, and they did not. And I'm not blaming it all on Scott Turner, but I would say from the get-go, I don't know that the Chiefs have a lot of parts. They figure out how to use them. I don't know that Washington's quite figured out exactly what they're doing yet. I think just as a general, this is how we operate. I don't get a sense that I know week to week what it's going to be. And this week was a touch surprising because they played a weak defense and it looked like they should run the ball and they didn't. And so that seemed a little confusing to me.
This episode is brought to you by HP Plus. In a world full of smart devices, shouldn't your printer be smart too? It is with HP Plus. These printers know when they're running low, so you always get the ink you need delivered right when you need it. Plus, you save up to 50% on ink, so you can print whatever you want, as much as you want, anytime you want. Huh, that is pretty smart. Get 6 free months of instant ink when you choose HP Plus. Conditions apply. Visit hp.com/smart for details.
This episode is brought to you by Shell. College football is back, where the game day excitement is felt in the bottom of your soul and voiced at the top of your lungs. But wherever you share your excitement, ESPN and Shell can take your fandom further with savings up to 15 cents per gallon for fuel rewards members at Shell. Welcome home, football fans. Terms and conditions apply. See fuelrewards.com/fuelyourfandom for details. Shell is an official sponsor of ESPN College Football. ESPN, the ESPN logo, and ESPN College Football are registered trademarks of ESPN Incorporated.
And I thought, like, part of me wondered, well, they came out with some play action early, and it's always like, well, you think we're going to run, so we're just going to throw it, but their strength still should be running the ball. And
this is like what the Saints did a week ago. Like, the Saints came out and looked at Washington, but at least it made sense because Washington's pass defense wasn't stopping anybody. But the Saints were not throwing the ball. They were one of the worst pass offenses, and they came out throwing. 5 of their first 6 plays were passes. It bit them in the behind because they threw an interception because they're not good at it. Right. But this was like one of the things where I looked at Washington and I'm like, don't you want to run the ball here? Like, don't you want to shorten the game here? Don't you want to, like, get the time to tick down a little bit? Because, you know, what I saw with Kansas City, Mahomes has 8 interceptions. They've made a lot of mistakes this year. So they've opened the door for people. And that's why they were 2-3 coming in. And what I found in watching them was you really, really, really need to resist the urge of the get a turnover, go for the jugular type stuff. Because if you give the ball back to them in too short a period of time, they're resilient. They'll come back and they're going to hit you. And if you give them too many chances, eventually it's jackpot with them. And once it starts going the wrong way, forget it, you know, like, it's over. So I don't know that I felt like they came in managing this particularly well. And either way, I'm not sure I would have thought they would have won, but based on how the first half went, the fact that they ended up losing by 18 and not scoring in the second half, it feels like a miss to me.
To me, it's a big miss. And that's where, you know, like, you want to be aggressive, like we were talking about earlier on those 4th down calls, but I think you have to play to what your strength should be. And that should have been the run game a little bit more. And now, last thing is, like, where are we at with Taylor Heineke? You know, I don't know what there's really much you can do. Like, I don't think Kyle Allen's going to come in and give them any kind of a spark. So do you have to ride this out until Fitzpatrick is healthy? And I'm not even blaming everything on him. I'm not blaming everything on him but I just think that what we've seen from him is he is a more of a, you know, very low end starter or a high quality backup. And there's nothing wrong with that, because it's much better than what people considered him a year ago at this time. But, you know, this, and I don't know that anything's going to change I don't think anything's going to change if Kyle Allen comes in. I think it's just a different guy.
Yeah. I don't get any sense that that's happening.
No, I don't either. I don't either.
And, you know, again, like, do you feel better about their chances with Kyle Allen versus Aaron Rodgers next week? Because I don't, you know, like, not necessarily. No offense to Kyle Allen, just not necessarily. Or
no, it doesn't.
And I really, again, like, this week, actually, I did not see Heineke make the mistakes that he made a week ago. Like, New Orleans has a good defense and goaded him into some mistakes. This week, I didn't actually see that. He clearly was not a difference maker for them at all, you know, and you know, so I do think, like, they leaned on him more than I thought they would, but he didn't make the type of plays specifically with his legs that extend things. So that didn't kind of happen
him in the
today.
Pocket. They kept him in the pocket. A really good job there.
They did. And so, you know, I think there's an experience factor that is starting to rear up and become obvious. And Rivera's been talking about this for the last couple of weeks, but, like, Buffalo and New Orleans, they have real defenses, and those real defenses were able to fool him into making mistakes. The games got a little too fast for him
to hold the ball
when they were down. Yes, got him to hold it, threw it into coverages that he probably didn't recognize would be there. Mistakes started happening. This was a bad defense today who did the best they could to just keep him in the pocket. They did a good job there. but he was incapable from that spot of leading them into big plays. And considering who they were playing today, it's very telling, that happened. So more and more tape, like they always say this, the more tape you get on somebody, the more things change, and they had an opportunity to see him. I don't think anything he did today warrants a change at all. I just think they are where they are. I think they are where they are at the position. That's what
I think that's more the troubling thing. Let's last topic then. Sean Taylor, the retirement ceremony. I know a lot of whatever mess about that this week, but what did it mean for you to see that his jersey retired?
It's a very hard topic to talk about, because you and I were both there. That's that was a terrible thing that happened. It was terrible.
Yeah.
The
memory of that hasn't escaped me. Like, I still remember what it was like when I found out, and just how surreal it all was. And there are still a lot of times where it's like you get a little bit of emotional because you were there.
A hard thing to talk. It really is. It's very hard to talk about. And on the pregame show, when we were talking about it, I'm sitting next to Santana Moss, who was very close to him.
Yeah.
And I think I just said out loud, I'm like, I had the misfortune of having to shove a microphone in your face and make you talk about it. Like, it was horrible. It was just a horrible experience. And I'll tell you, the thing that I really appreciated most about today was, because I do think back to that time, and I'm glad that most of this is forgotten, that after he died, there were things that were said and written about him that were about his character and that were very unfair, very unfair. They were written by people who were not around the team, who didn't really get to know him, who didn't realize that he had changed a lot in the few years that he had been there. He'd matured. He was a different person. And, so I was appreciative that 14 years later, not only does he matter this much, but that it's largely a very positive thing that people look at with him. And I think that's where his legacy really lies, that he did mature. He was a very good presence. I personally have never seen a better football player wear this uniform in my time covering them, for sure. And there's a lot of, it's like almost James Deanish. You're kind of like, I really don't know what would have happened had he had his full life and career, and what he would have meant and what he would have been. And it's long overdue. How I feel about the retirement of jerseys is a whole other conversation, because I have a, personal affection for an organization that didn't do that. And I found it interesting that they just started doing that. But but if they are going to,
there's others they need to do.
His belongs. Yeah.
His belongs. And there's others.
His belongs. Yes. Yeah. But I mean, there's a long list now if we're going to start doing this, and maybe you're going to start seeing it next year.
And I think that'd be smart if they're going to retire Bobby's and then Sean's. You've got Daryl, Rigo,
Art Monk. Yeah.
Maybe
Graham, Clark,
Charlie, Sonny,
yes,
guys like that. And for me,
for me, Ken Houston, Larry Brown, there's a lot of names if you're going to do this.
And Bram, for me with Sean, because I love the X's and O's part and just watching great players operate and all that. And I did, as a reporter, we didn't know him as well as those guys did. But when I'll talk to guys, Steve Jackson, who coached him, or guys that play with them, even now, we inevitably end up talking about him, because it was so much of a man. Just imagine where that kid was going, because that last year he was playing awesome ball. He was great. There were great at times before that, but there were flashes both ways to a degree. I mean, much more better. But he didn't become the great player where you said, now he's on that trajectory where he's going to the Hall of Fame. In that last year, he was awesome, because even the players and coaches, his coaches would say that, and that he was marrying the study side with the play side, and he was killing quarterbacks because of it. And that's what from that shame. But then now, as a parent, when I'm watching his dad and his family accept that, I think of it not as much not from a football perspective, but from a parent's perspective, and the pain that must still be there for them all these years later, when they're as great as it is, how hollow it still must feel. I'm like, that's where I start to get choked up too.
Yeah, it's a tough subject. It really is.
It really is.
It's one of those, this organization's gone through a lot in the last, 20, 30 years. And I just don't know, would their fortunes on the field have been different if he played his whole career, because of how good he already was and how good he was probably going to be? I don't know.
The impact he had on others.
The impact he had on others, think about there's a lot of young players in the league that still talk about him and want to wear 21. And we're talking about people that were 8 or 9 years old when he died.
Yeah.
So think about that as an impact for a moment, that like he's carried that kind of legacy for such a short period of time. There was something about him. He was easily one of the most intimidating presences I've ever seen. You know, like he's one of the rare people that would be out on the field, and you could tell the other team was scared of him a little bit. Players were literally scared of him. And I'll reiterate, there's only been a few special athletic talents that come through, probably for any team, but for our team. And for me, in covering them, it's LeVar Arrington, Sean Taylor, and now Chase Young. And I haven't seen anything like him in a defensive backfield before. And it just, I think, it's more sad than happy than anything.
It is sad because and I know for fans listening, it's the same way, which is why you saw a lot of 21 jerseys, which is why the fans got so emotional with how this all was handled. And, but let's keep it on the field, or just keep it to him right now. But it is like, when I was watching Champ Bailey early on, I remember getting to the point, I'm watching a Hall of Fame player. And on that last year, you feel like, okay, I'm now watching a Hall of Fame player. And from a personal standpoint, we really didn't get to know him that well. And I remember even having a conversation with Chris Elon, who was then the PR director, about how, Sean's starting to come around. We're starting to gain his trust. And he was a guy, not just with the media, but with coaches and players. It took a while to gain his trust. And I don't blame him. There were times where something would, you start to get it, and then something would happen somewhere else with another outlet or whatever, and it would just push him back 2 notches. But you could start to see the growth in him. But I don't take that stuff personal, because, he didn't know me. I understand it's a media thing, and I get that. But you could see the growth, and you heard the growth. I remember John Jansen, a couple years earlier, I talked to him, and he's like, I don't really know him. He doesn't really, he's kind of by himself a little bit. That last year, I remember after he died, I went to Jansen. He was talking about his growth. And if Jansen saw this, and he was talking about how closer he had gotten to him over the last couple of years because of that growth. So that's, like I said, I go back to it as a parent and the hole that they must have in their hearts still, and that will always be there. And that's the part that I have a harder time with. And again, it was just, the whole thing was surreal for everybody. And just seeing his locker in the locker room after that happened, it's like you just you look at it and you don't want to stare at it, but you looked at it because it was just so sad. And and it just, watching people cry that you really like because of the pain that they have. And we're not part of the team. My God, you're out there. You're human. You feel things. And that's so somebody who was here, those things are still always going to be there.
Yeah, I mean, it's the one and only time I ever cried on the air, and it was just because I was in a building that was overwhelmed with grief. I got overwhelmed with it. Yeah, I got overwhelmed with grief by it, because it was horrible. It was horrible. Like you, I didn't have a very close relationship with him because he didn't want to have a relationship with me.
Oh, that's okay. That's his choice.
And but if you go back to what was being written and said about it, you understand why.
Yeah, I didn't blame him for that. Yeah, I didn't. Blame him for that.
So but I'm glad it happened. I know, I don't even want to address what happened earlier in the week, because I really felt like that the focus should just be on honoring him, because it was happening and the family was there. And you can be as mad as you want about how it went down. You can believe whatever you want about it. I'm not in the building. I don't know what happened. I don't know why things happened the way they did. They just did. Once I got around to today, I just felt like he deserved to be honored, and we should not worry about how we got here. Who cares? He's being honored. Try to, however you want to, internalize it, try to do that.
Yeah. And I know what I've heard about it, and people can make up their own minds, and I'm with you on that one. So there we go. Bram, let's end right there, and we'll talk again next week after the Green Bay game.
All right, see you.
That's it for this episode. Thanks to Bram for joining me, and thank you, as always, for tuning in. It never gets easy for you guys, so I always appreciate that you do come back. And I'll be back either Tuesday night or Wednesday morning with another episode. We'll talk to you next time.